Good morning. This is Tech Talk Today. My name is Chris, and we got to start right now at the top of the show with something we don't normally do. But ladies and gentlemen, this is the biggest story yet.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Happening right now, just as this show goes on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a massive development. I am absolutely excited to announce that, yes,
we get together, the more we get together.
Goat Simulator is available for Linux. Ladies and gentlemen, contain your excitement. You can now play as a goat under the Linux operating system. It just hit Steam for Linux right now.
For your friends are my friends, and my friends are your friends. The more we get together, the happier we'll be.
God damn it, Chris. I bought that game this morning and I had that song in my head all day and you just restarted the earworm.
I'm sorry. That is the problem with it being in the evening over there, because you just finally got it out. Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. We're going to go through some headlines. Besides Goat Simulator, there's more than just that, but that was pretty big breaking news, and I saw that over on linuxgames.com. People have been excited about that. Come on, I know. But why don't we start with the actual tech news today? This one's interesting. I think some good news for a lot of us Nexus fans. Google has said that no, we're not killing the Nexus phone. In fact, emphatically, you might say. I'll read you the quotes and I'll tell you a little bit about it here. This is all coming from David Burke, by the way. He's the head of Android engineering and the Nexus program at Google. He says every time Google releases a new named and numbered version of Android, it also announces a new Nexus device, but built by one of Google's top manufacturers like LG or Samsung. People are just excited by the concepts and forget why we do things, he says. I don't know. This is an explanation as why people thought the Nexus program would be shut down. He said, we are still invested in Nexus. This is according to an interview with readwrite.com. Now, they did try to get some information out of him about Android Silver. He said, Android Silver is not something we're commenting on right now, but the prospect of Silver does not mean that the Nexus is going away. And this was a direct quote that I think speaks volumes about smartphone manufacturing, building an operating system, building a cohesive environment. Direct quote, he says, you can't build a platform in the abstract. You have to build a device. You have to build it for a device. So I don't think one can or will or can ever go away. And then I think Nexus is also interesting in that it's a way of explaining how we think Android should run. It's a statement, almost a statement of purity in some respects. I don't see why we would ever turn away from that. It wouldn't make sense. So what do you think, guys? Nexus is safe, right? I think his comment, I find it interesting because Google is making a software platform for a lot of different devices, but he has just essentially admitted, I don't mean to get into this, but God, well, here we go. He's essentially admitted what Apple's been saying all along, is in order to do it right, you have to build the software and the hardware together. Now, if you do that, how do you really make an operating system that's perfect for all kinds of different devices? It really, and I think about this, when I use a Nexus device, it really does feel like Android was built for that device. And that's one of the reasons I like my Nexus 5, is it feels like a perfect fit. And I've always just thought, well, in the back of my mind, maybe this is what Google's been writing Android towards. And now this David Burke here just confirmed it. And he's the head of Android engineering and the Nexus program at Google. And he just said, we can't build a version of Android without writing it for a specific device. That's how you have to do it. Well, that's kind of a big deal if you ask me. I don't know. I guess the mumble room does not agree. But to me, that seems like a huge insight into how Google builds Android, and means that Nexus is sort of fundamental to future versions of Android. And it also would suggest, don't you think, that when Android L, Lollipop, or whatever it's going to be called, ships in the fall, we'll also see a new Nexus device. And did you notice at Google I.O. last week that everybody was using a Nexus 5 for their demo? I think that was also Google's way of saying, no, we're all about the Nexus. We all use it. We love the Nexus. And I think they're also saying we're going to see a new Nexus in the fall. All right, one more Google story. YouTube introduces 60 frames per second support for YouTube videos and crowdfunding. So let's talk about the first part, because this is interesting for gamers for sure. 60 frames per second is absolutely targeted at gamers. If Chase was here, he'd tell you how much of a difference it really does make. Plus, Folks that are streaming from like the PlayStation 4 a lot of times want 60 frames per second for the games that actually support it. I think this is interesting. Also on the YouTube creator blog, they talked about the new fan funding is what they're calling it, which we've kind of had hints at for a while now. The feature will allow fans to contribute money to a channel at any time for any reason, and YouTube plans to roll it out soon. I think they already have a few beta testers, and they'll probably be expanding that. This will make a huge difference, they say on the YouTube blog, to those whose channels aren't necessarily big enough to benefit from ad revenue. YouTube has already gotten a handful of creators to sign up to test it out on both desktop and Android. YouTube clients will support it. I think this is kind of a neat idea. I think of mostly the Let's Play community potentially here, because a lot of times you can get a few hundred folks who will watch your videos, but you're not going to get maybe thousands. Some of them do. But I think the majority don't. And this is that in that kind of setup where you're only getting a few hundred views, you're never going to make anything on ad revenue. And this, if there's a few folks who really love your stuff, this would be a way for them to contribute directly. And I think this is a neat idea. I'm not planning to use it. Don't know if I would recommend people really rely on that. I think it's been pretty risky relying on YouTube as a revenue platform. They can, there's a strike policy, and you can get your videos pulled down. That's something I've fought with a lot. And just 2 weeks ago, we had a totally legitimate episode of the Linux Action Show pulled down worldwide, and they disabled all revenue sharing on that. And even though it had revenue sharing on for a while before it got pulled down, they don't give us any of that money. And it's not a lot of money. But it is something that probably happens weekly to us for at least one of our shows. And most of the time it goes through a dispute process where it gets resolved. But even during that dispute time and that resolution time, you're not making any money, right? There's no revenue. And of course, that all happens when the video first goes up on YouTube for the first few days, which is when you get the most views. So it's when you lose out on the most revenue. So it's risky to depend on YouTube for that kind of thing. But isn't this still just nice to have as an additional source? You've got Flatter out there. People have been doing Bitcoin, like tip QR codes in their video. Yeah, you got a button right there. It's probably tied into Google Wallet. So if you got a Google Wallet for Android apps and stuff like that, I would imagine that's going to be the back-end plumbing here. I think it could be an interesting way for folks to get a little bit of extra funding. We'll see what happens. Speaking,
is this basically admitting that adverts don't work on YouTube? Is that essentially what they're saying? Is that we know that you're not making revenue from people clicking through ads because they're either blocking them or just not clicking them. So here's another way for you to make money.
I wonder if since we'll probably be.
Yikes, sorry, I changed tabs and a Flash video started. Yay, Flash!
Since you'll probably be using Google Wallet, I wonder if Google will take a cut every time you
for
tip
sure.
someone.
For sure.
So I don't know what to think about it really, because on one end, I also wonder if they disable your ad revenue, whether they will disable your tip button or whatever it's going to be called, because and I think not just because of that word the words whatever reason. So if you tip someone, you tip the channel, not the video. So it's not necessarily that you're making revenue of that video, you're making revenue as a channel.
That'd be interesting to see, yeah. That's up to their implementation.
It's a way of providing revenue, at least some revenue, while your video is being disputed.
Yeah, I wonder if they do keep that on. I think you're right. If the distinction is you're tipping the channel, not the video, that might work. I don't think they will implement it that way, and because one of the most profound metrics you can have is the actual financial contribution from your audience, and by having it based on the individual video, it is such a clear indication of what type of content your audience likes. If one particular video gets a lot more tips than another type of video, you know that your audience likes that type of content, and if they make it at the channel level, you will lose that particular insight. And I think Google's keen enough on that they wouldn't do it like that. Plus, the other thing is sometimes you just have one video go super viral on YouTube and the rest of your channel doesn't get a ton of traction. And I don't know, because I like your idea. I like the basic idea that if you get sort of screwed by the ad man because they have a much higher standards because they don't want to associate advertisers with any illegal activity like you putting some music in your video or something real bad like a video game clip. So they got to disable the advertising because they don't want to offend the advertiser. But if it's your audience and they're tipping you anyways, you would think maybe technically and legally they could still leave that on even if they take off the ad stuff. My gut, I think if your video gets flagged for inappropriate something or other, even if it's language, sex, or copyright violation, I think you lose all ability to monetize it, is my bet, because they want to, they really want to make sure that what's posted to YouTube is legit. And I don't think they want to encourage, because what could happen is people could upload TV shows and then people would just tip the crap out of it and encourage people to pirate potentially. It really would be interesting to see how they do it.
I think YouTube at large doesn't care too much about what's getting uploaded to YouTube. It's the legal team that cares. So
right, yeah.
I think the part it all kind of depends on how it's implemented, right? So if you tip a video, then legally it means that a given person is making revenue on that video. So if there's copyrighted music in it, it means that you're making revenue of that music and they would have to disable it. But if you tip a channel, it means it's the channel that's making the revenue, not necessarily you making revenue from that music clip. So it adds a level of complexity to it. So it kind of depends on how they play it too. But I guess they could use it to make it possible for someone to make revenue while a video is being disputed.
I would love to see them just say, hey, here's an API, PayPal, Coinbase, Stripe. You all can write plugins that people can opt to use on their YouTube account. And YouTube is the distribution channel, but YouTube is disconnected from the revenue of the tipping. Well, they would never do this, I know. But then I would be a lot more comfortable about it. YouTube for the distribution and the audience and the reach, obvious. That's a no-brainer. And Stripe or PayPal for the monetization, that seems obvious and a no-brainer, and it's a win-win. And I'd even be okay if there's a way for Google to take a cut. But having Google end-to-end control it means that these kinds of questions that you and I are kicking around right now really have to be clearly spelled out. The problem is, as somebody who's fought that whole content management system for years and years and years, I can tell you it is very, very, very opaque. It is very vague. And even though I have been fortunate enough to have YouTube representatives work with me over the phone and troubleshoot this stuff, even then when I'm talking to people involved at YouTube, they're very vague about what the rules are, about what you can and can't do, how the strike system works, all of it. And so, I'm really glad that folks that are going to upload Minecraft videos can make some money. But it's not going to fundamentally change who's going to be an independent content creator. But if they implemented the way Dave's suggesting, I'd be really down for that, because I think tipping a whole channel does sort of remove that risk you get exposed to if YouTube decides one of your videos has got to go. We should probably move on, because not everybody listening is going to be monetizing their YouTube videos. And I do have something that might be more applicable, at least if you're in Australia. It's not in the US or the UK yet, but how do you like this? Hyundai is building a car that knows where speed cameras are, and it'll automatically tap the brakes and slow you down so you don't get a ticket. Now, that sounds like it could be potentially disastrous. Let me read a little bit to you. You can watch a video that we have linked in the show notes if you want to see the clip. The speed camera fines could become a thing of the past if Hyundai has their way with it. Now, this is something they're introducing in this brand new luxury line of Hyundais they're trying to gin up a bunch of excitement for. The brand is set to sell these luxury sedans in Australia. It's capable of outsmarting speed cameras with a combination of GPS tracking and braking technology. Speaking in Seoul at the launch of the Hyundai Genesis, the company spokesperson said that the car could identify speed cameras and would alert the driver if they're going too fast and slow down. Now, I don't know if that slow down part is like a setting or if it just does it.
Just like pull the handbrake on and do a handbrake turn in front of the camera. Do you get like extra points for a really cool photo? You do get taken.
I like the idea, I suppose. I think I would prefer just a nice polite notification. I don't know about the braking. Is that am I getting too old, you guys?
Yeah. Well, so in the UK we've had we've had devices that you can put in your car that you can update online. I mean, there was one years ago which would plug directly in the phone line and it would dial up and download updates. This is like pre-internet.
Cool.
that would download updates, and all it had was a sequence of 10 LEDs, and you just put it on the dashboard. And as you're approaching, you get more and more LEDs lighting up red, and then as you're going away from it, they go down in green.
Yeah.
So you know you're approaching or not. And it didn't even need a display. It didn't need to be something complex like a TomTom or anything like that. I think that's a great idea, because the whole point of speed cameras, aside from the money-making side, the whole point of speed cameras is to get people to reduce their speed. And whether at certain road conditions, okay, it might be possible to go a little bit faster, but the fact is that the speed camera is there to try and get you to slow down. And if
Is that why it's there? Or is it there to make money?
Well, partly. I mean, we have them a lot. As you know, in the UK, we have a lot of them. And, I would often drive and, creep up a little bit on the speedo and then sail through one and get a ticket.
Yeah, have you played with Waze, though? Because Waze could alert you of that stuff, too.
No, I haven't tried that. But the other problem we have in the UK is there are mobile traffic, I can't remember what they call them, community police officers or something, where they have a van by the side of the road and it's got blacked out windows, and they wait and catch you as you're going down the road, and then you see them at the last minute and then it's too late.
That sounds horrible. Horrible.
Oh yeah, it is. Yeah, don't move to the UK. It's horrible. But yeah, we have those, and they're horrible. Yeah.
Oh, well, we got the speed cameras going. Up in my neck of the woods, very rarely they'll also patrol via airplane, which is pretty much impossible, except for if you've grown up here your whole life and you know to look for it. It's so dirty, but I use Waze right now, and the nice thing about Waze is because I live in a rural area, it's not as populated, so people are not pinning things on the map like cops and speed traps and stuff, but cameras, because they're fixed, they're always pretty much on the Waze map. And so I always get an alert. As you're approaching Waze, we'll say hey, X amount of distance ahead of you, there's a red light camera. Watch out, buddy. And I'll just kind of slow down a little bit. I kind of like the idea, though.
Which is the goal achieved, isn't it? So however you found out about it, whether you... I mean, over here, they have to make them obvious now. It used to be that they were hidden behind road signs so that you didn't know they were there. Now they have to make them obvious. Legally, they have to have red, black and yellow
They get me to slow
stripes.
down either way, right? Though, I mean,
yeah, exactly.
You're absolutely right.
Win-win.
Yeah. And I think that whole Waze idea, the reason I like to use it, I actually have sort of pulled back from it a little bit, but what I like about it is the whole idea that... crowdsourcing road accidents and closures and bad traffic is fascinating to me. I would love to see something like that integrated into cars. Now that, it just seems like all manufacturers are always going to have their own standard, but something that could be isolated and sandboxed from the rest of the operation of the car, where cars could be aware of where each other are at and get an idea of traffic flow, and then have that automatically influence the navigation in a way that was positive for the driver. I would love that.
Google Android for cars, then?
Maybe. I mean, we did see, maybe because the thing they're doing with Android Mobile or whatever, Android Auto, whatever they're calling it, I like that it's a projection system again. So that way, they could keep updating the Waze app, or I could get a tablet one day that maybe has some crazy ass cool functionality that could be projected in there. So maybe that could happen. I'm actually, I want self-driving cars. I want something to park for me. There's a lot of tracking implications there, but
I want to be able to sit at traffic lights, and when the lights go green, I want every car in the queue to pull away at the same time.
Right.
I don't want to wait for the first one, then the second one, then the third one.
Yeah,
I want them all to go.
Or minimal, if there's a reason to slow down on the freeway, there's minimal brake tapping, we just slow down, just the absolute minimum we have to. Intersections could be so much better. I think about it all the time when I'm stuck in traffic. I just think about how much better all this could be when all these monkeys aren't behind the wheels and they're playing with their phones instead of driving. And maybe listening and watching podcasts, too. One more story before we run out of here. We got to get an NSA story in, just for Dave. So this one is coming out of Germany. See, look, we just had an Australia story and a Germany story. I'm making up for some of the U.S.-centric stuff we've had in the last few days. This one is over Verizon losing a contract with the government. Here is the deets. Germany has opted not to renew. So it's not like they're just canceling it outright, despite how a lot of people are reporting it. They've just opted not to renew a contract that would have expired in 2015. Now, the actual announcement's in German. I don't speak German, except for Guten Morgen. So we do have a translation. Berlin notes that it needs an infrastructure with an increased level of security. Verizon has been running this contract since 2010. They state there are indications that Verizon is legally required to provide certain things to the NSA, and that's one of the reasons cooperation with Verizon will not continue. This is according to an Interior Ministry spokesperson who told reporters, according to the Associated Press. Now, you'll recall back in October, it was revealed that the NSA was monitoring Angela Merkel's phone. After that whole hoopla, several weeks afterwards, the NSA came out and said, okay, we will stop monitoring Miss Merkel's phone. Instead, we will monitor all of her chancellor's phones, or all of her whatever it is. I forget the deputy or whatever, all of the other people in her cabinet, but we will not monitor her. And so I guess they were looking at this and going, well, how are they doing? Oh, it's probably this contract we have with Verizon, and they're canceling it. Now, the reason why I bring this up is because we've also heard about issues with IBM selling their x86 division of servers to Lenovo. It's also come out in an IBM quarterly call that that's been put on hold while both the Chinese government and the U.S. government review that because of security concerns, because there's a lot of IBM x86 servers in Pentagon infrastructure. This is the type of real-world blowback. We had a really robust pre-show discussion about how there's just a little bit of NSA fatigue, understandably so. But the problem isn't that we're talking about it too much. The problem is the government has greatly overstepped its bounds. And really, us talking about it isn't probably going to influence too much change. But when you've got companies like Verizon and IBM and Cisco and Microsoft that are publicly stating that they are losing money and they're being hurt by this, that might actually push some change. So we're going to keep monitoring it just lightly and see where things develop. Interesting for Verizon, an interesting move from Germany. That's heating up. They're doing a whole round of investigations they have announced around the NSA spying, so a bit interesting there. But nonetheless, not much more than that at the moment. These things do take time. All right, guys. Well, thank you for joining me. I thought, we've been talking about YouTube videos. Well, maybe before we go, we should look back at how you actually make money out there in media, and that's on the TV. And if you're going to have a TV, well, then why not buy a beautiful Zenith television?
If you had a friend who was a king, what kind of a gift would you give him? Well, there are many people of prominence who have been thrilled to receive this. Zenith's famous 9-band transoceanic, the world's most exciting radio. Powered to tune in the world. You'll find every Zenith radio, from the famous transoceanic to the tiniest pocket transistor, is built in the Zenith quality tradition.
Wait a minute, it's a radio!
Including super-sensitive FM
Hold on
AM
a
radios,
second.
and some table and clock radios, and powerful solid-state portables. Over 100 radios to choose from, priced to fit every gift budget. At Zenith, the quality goes in before the name goes on.
Remember, kids.
If you're buying a radio for a king, a friend, or for yourself, why not get the best?
Theater of the Mind.